You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is the Bat Flip Podcast, episode number 62, and we're coming to you on November 23rd, 2021, here on Thanksgiving week, and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving out there, and got a lot of free agency news today, but before we get to that, I was going to bring in Damian, and how are you doing today, Damian?
I'm doing really well. Just like you said, getting ready for this Thanksgiving weekend, getting ready to stuff myself on Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday with way too much food than I should probably be eating. But happy Thanksgiving to everyone that's listening to this, and get ready for some hot stove news because it's been wild, and it only seems like it's going to get crazier here before the last week before the CBA runs out.
Yeah, no doubt. There's going to be a rush here in this last week to bring in some players right before the CBA ends that are wanting to get everything out of the way and be done with it. So we should have a lot of news this week. But for starters, we do have some deals that happened in the past week, and the first one that we're going to talk about is a future Hall of Famer that made his deal at 39 years old, getting a lot of money.
Yeah, so Justin Verlander, there was a lot of talk about him, about if he was going to re-sign with the Astros or the Yankees or somewhere else, but he decided to re-sign on a 1-year, $25 million deal with the Houston Astros that also has a player option for another 1 year, $25 million. So in total, it could be a 2-year, $50 million deal.
Yes, this was a very interesting signing for Houston, no doubt. Justin Verlander, obviously one of the best pitchers of our generation. Future Hall of Famer, absolutely surefire future Hall of Famer. Um, you look at his career numbers: a 333 ERA, 341 FIP, 372 xFIP. He's put up 72 wins above replacement in his career, and several seasons of 200 innings. He's been very durable, but the problem is that durability ran out in 2020 when he had to have Tommy John surgery after one start, and obviously this year he didn't pitch at all, recovering from that, and coming back at age 39 from a Tommy John surgery is not an easy thing to do. We have not seen it very much. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Justin Verlander looks like this year. How healthy he is, and if he's ready to go, then this could be a pretty nice signing. But we'll see. So
Yeah, this deal always made sense for the Astros. Once they offered him the qualifying offer, it was kind of hard seeing any other team really try and commit to Verlander, with giving up a draft pick compensation. On a pitcher at 39 coming off of Tommy John, it you just, like you said, you didn't have any track history of that at all. And even though it was so early in 2020, and he'll basically be almost 2 full years, by the time he pitches again in a major league regular season game, he's still going to be on some sort of an innings cap this year. If that's 150 to 160. I mean, it's good. It's just hard to envision that he's going to come out and be able to throw, that 220 innings again and then be fresh for a postseason run. Like that's going to wear you down. We saw it with a bunch of pitchers this year who would thrown, 60 to 80 innings last year trying to come back and throw over 200 innings, and they wore down as well. So it's really interesting for Verlander, but I think it's a place of comfort. It's a place that already knows him, knows the whole Tommy John history, his whole medical history since the surgery, how he's actually doing, and a place that can be, really easy with him, because we've already seen them still make a deep run into the playoffs this year, into the World Series. So they don't need him to be, God tier level to get that, but he still will give them some solid rotation depth, or not depth, but a solid piece in that rotation for a team that, has lacked that depth ever since he went down, really.
yeah, and when it comes to Justin Verlander, one little quick fact about him is that since his rookie year, which was back in 2006, his real rookie year, he pitched a little bit in 2005 in the big leagues, but since 2006, he has only failed to eclipse 200 innings one time in 2015 out of seasons that he pitched, and then of course until 2020 when he went down with the Tommy John. So we'll see what he's able to do, and it'll be very interesting. But I think it made sense for the Astros to bring him back, and it made sense for his sake to go back to the Astros. So it'll be we'll see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, so we'll move on to our next deal, and it's with the Los Angeles Angels, who we said they were going to need some pitching and stay pretty aggressive in signing Aaron Loup to a 2-year, $17 million deal with a third-year option with worth $7.5 million as well.
Yeah, Aaron Loup is a good pitcher. He's never gotten quite the credit that I think he deserves. He pitched for what 6 years in Toronto, and then he's moved around a little bit. This past year pitched with the Mets, and this is a guy that's put up for his career has put up a 3.05 ERA, which is very respectable. This year he put up an 0.95 ERA, which was a little bit, a little bit inflated because of he had a much higher FIP and XFIP, but still did had a great season this year. The best season of his career. A 245 FIP would show that he legitimately was really good. Although maybe not 95.95 ERA good, but didn't give up many homers. That was really the key to his season this year. His home run per fly ball rate was 2.7, so a lot of weak contact on fly balls. And that's really something that's probably kind of unsustainable. But if he can put up a similarly good number, I think he could definitely have a big year. And the Angels need relief pitching really badly. That's a spot where they struggled a lot this year, starting and relievers. They were good in the closer role this past year with Rizal Iglesias, but they weren't very deep in the bullpen, and none of their top relievers really were left-handed. I mean, they also had, Cishek in there as a right-handed reliever. And I think Tony Watson was there for a while, was like their top lefty reliever. So they definitely needed an Aaron Loup type of guy, and that's what they went out and got. So it's good move for them.
Yeah, and Loup was always known as one of those guys that was kind of that lefty specialist. So he never really got much run. But this year, since they've really had that 3-batter minimum, he's proven that he can get both sides of the plate out really well. A 167 against lefties this year, but only a 211 batting average against righties. A 290 on base against righties, a 257 against righties. All the numbers are a little lower from lefties due to that little weird arm angle that sneaks up on lefties, kind of comes from behind them a little bit. But like you said, Loup is a really good pitcher that he hasn't been given, probably the amount of acknowledgement that he should be given for the type of career he's put up in the major league so far. But really solid deal for the Angels. They're still going to need that back end guy. Maybe they can re-sign Rysel. They're still going to need some other pitchers into that rotation / bullpen. But getting a guy like Aaron Loup is a really good start to your offseason of rebuilding that pitching staff.
Absolutely. I really like the move.
Well, let's jump over to another team that re-signed somebody, and that's the San Francisco Giants. Re-signed starting pitcher Anthony DeSclfani on a 3-year, $36 million deal.
Yeah, Anthony DeSclfani had a very good season this year. He's a guy who's been a little up and down in his career. He's put up, this is his third season of a sub-4 ERA, which is pretty nice. But he's also had a season of a 7.22 ERA, a season of a 4.93 ERA, and a season of a 4.05 ERA. But for his career, pretty decent pitcher. For San Francisco, 167 innings this year, 3.17 ERA. A little bit lower than his peripheral show, but that's a great showing for him. His ground ball rate was at a career high this year, and he also increased his strikeout rate while lowering his walks this year, which all that is just a perfect recipe for success. So um, did a very good job for them, and I'm not surprised at all that they decided to bring him back and see if another year in that San Francisco system can make him even better. Which he had a great year this year. Maybe in another year he could even take another step. So definitely a good signing for them, and a guy who 31 years old, not an enormous contract, and it kind of feels about right. So.
Yeah, he was a guy who started off the season really strong, and then kind of started struggling once July happened. In July he had a 3.68 ERA, and then August a 5.93 ERA. September and October he started, turning it around a little bit more. But what the Giants are able to do and what they did this year with that pitching staff, were really trying to make a pitcher find what they do well and just stick to that instead of trying to do what the hitter doesn't do well. It was talked about a lot with what Logan Webb was doing, with what DeSclfani did, with what Gosman was doing. They just let them, focus in on what they do the best and take it off from there. And DeSclfani, he had, like you said, a career year so far, and it will be interesting to see if he can, keep that up these next couple years with the San Francisco Giants. And, along with that, what I was just mentioning, Alex Wood is also close on a 2-year deal with them to return back to the Giants on a deal worth $10 million, over $10 million a season. And he was another guy who's been really solid throughout his career and had a really good year with the Giants as well.
Yeah, so Alex Wood, a guy that he's been a pretty solid pitcher for his entire career. He's bounced around a little bit. He's got a really weird delivery and has battled some injury issues, probably a little bit related to that delivery, but um, started off in Atlanta, was really solid, got traded to the Dodgers where he was also pretty solid. Had a great year back in 2017. But injuries really have been what caught up with him. But I mean, he had a good year in San Francisco this year. He's not a guy you're going to be able to count on to get 200 innings or even close to that. But he's a guy who you can count on to get to pitch 130, 140 innings of really good ball. And I think that's what you'll see from Alex Wood in 2022. Regardless of where he's at, and I think that going back to San Francisco is a great place for him to be. I mean, obviously this year it seemed to work out pretty well. Pitched to a 138 innings to a 3.83 ERA. He's just a guy you're going to have to be able to rest enough to keep him healthy. And if he does that, I definitely think that being in San Francisco will be a good place for him. So I would like that signing for the Giants going into next year. Obviously, depending on the prices of it and everything.
Yeah, and the front office, the general manager or president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, he knows him from his years with the Dodgers. I mean, he was one of the big reasons why the Dodgers traded for Alex Wood. So he has a history with him, and they kind of have a good working relationship, so they know what each other wants and what they need. It is going to be fascinating to see if they do continue, or if they do get that deal done. And the way the Giants kind of round out this rotation, because 4 of their 5 rotation guys were free agents this year, so they're also in serious talks with Alex Cobb about a potential deal that seems to be gaining more momentum the past couple days to happening. They're also in on Steven Matz, who we'll talk about here in just a little bit. One team or one player we haven't heard them in as much on is Kevin Gossman, who had a great year for them as well. They are still in on him. We just haven't heard as much rumors around him. And I think he's just not as close to signing as these other guys. But, re-signing DeSclfani, getting Wood back. If you do get a guy like a Cobb or Matz, it's a pretty good start to your rotation.
Yeah, and Alex Cobb feels like one of those guys that for the San Francisco Giants they could unlock some stuff with in a similar way to what they did this year. He feels kind of like maybe a little bit like a Logan Webb type of guy who they could potentially change his fastball a little bit and unlock some things. So we'll see what happens there. And obviously, that's a very risky strategy to rely on guys you have to change stuff up with and unlock stuff. But that's maybe a buy low or buy medium signing that you could end up doing really well with.
Yeah, with Cobb, it's just going to be can he stay healthy? This year, I mean, he hasn't pitched over 100 innings since 2018. And this year, I mean, with the Angels, he had 93 innings, but he battled some wrist and blister issues. But, if they can get him and like you said, unlock something, he could still be a really solid arm for them. And it's all going to be about, they're going to go to their bullpen a lot as well. So it's going to be about finding those guys that can go 150 to 160 innings and then just let the bullpen go the rest of the way. So really solid for them there. And if they can pull that off, we'll definitely hit on it as those moves get completed. But let's go ahead and move on to probably our biggest story of the day, or of this episode at least, and that's stud, superstar, young shortstop, whatever you want to call him, Wander Franco signs an 11-year, $182 million contract with the Tampa Bay Rays. It has a 12th year option with some bonuses and MVP award finishes that could push the overall deal up to 12 years, $223 million. This deal would buy out 5 years of his free agency with a possible 6th year.
Yeah, now this is a big time deal on both sides, really, because I mean, if you're Wander Franco, you've played 70 games in the big leagues and gotten 308 plate appearances, and you're getting guaranteed $182 million. So that's a fantastic deal for Wander Franco. I'm not going to listen to all the dummies that are saying that he shouldn't have signed this deal. It was terrible or whatever, because he could have gotten, next year he could come out in the, God forbid, in the very first game and tear up his knee or something and never play again. Like, so if you're Wander Franco, you take this deal. It's $182 million. It's generational wealth, and that's something that is very, very, very special for a 20-year-old to come into. And for the Rays, this is I'm sure the biggest deal they've ever signed. I didn't even look up if it was, but I'm sure it is. And you're getting a player that, I mean, this guy, what he did this year in only 70 games, age 20, was special. And the best thing about what he did this year was that he played his strengths that people kind of thought of coming up were his strengths. I mean, his plate discipline is probably, for a young guy, especially a shortstop, is as good as we've ever seen. I mean, he put up a 12% strikeout rate, an 8% walk rate in his first ever 70 games of his career. And which falls right in line with his AAA numbers too from this year. And I mean, his BABIP was a little bit lower than it probably will be in the future. As a guy who, in the minor leagues, this would be lower than any BABIP he hit for in the minor leagues. He's got to grow into more power as he goes, and an ability to play maybe not a plus shortstop, but a really solid shortstop and be a really good base runner. This guy is the next superstar. He could end up being the best player in the game. I mean, he's going to challenge for batting titles. I don't know if he's ever going to challenge for like home run titles or anything, but I mean, he's going to be he is special already, and he's going to just keep getting better. And I think this deal is fantastic for the Rays because, this is a guy who, the Rays are a team that a lot of times has had to trade players as a small market team when they get closer to free agency. I mean, we saw it last year with Blake Snell, Hunter Renfroe, a couple guys, and this is a deal that's going to prevent that from being a necessity, because Wander Franco there's going to be a lot of surplus value there, in my opinion, once he gets into his later years of arbitration. Whereas you might be paying him a little bit more than you typically would be to start off his deal, because right now he'd be making the major league minimum next year. But I'm sure they're giving him a big raise for next year and stuff, but buying out those free agent years are going to be able to keep a special talent at home for Tampa Bay, and that's a very, very, very big deal for them. So great deal on both sides, and hopefully Wander Franco continues to do what he does and to get even better, grow into his body a little bit more, get a little bit stronger, hit some more power while keeping everything else intact, and then for the Rays, you got as good of an asset to build around as anybody in the big leagues does right now. So
Yeah, and it's it's not a terrible deal because he could still hit free agency at right now. If that option doesn't get picked up at the age of 31, and even if that option does get picked up, he's hitting the market at the age of 32, and that's where a guy like Marcus Semien, I mean, he's right around. I think he's 32 right now, and he's on the market, and we're talking about him potentially getting a deal over $100 million again. So if Franco goes out and even has what kind of Simeon has done, I mean, he could go out and get another 100 million. You're looking at close to $300 million on your contracts or whatever. As far as what you were saying is the biggest contract the Rays have ever had. The biggest contract they had given out before was 6 years, $100 million
Longoria,
to Longoria.
yeah,
That would have pushed his overall deal because it was his second extension at the time to 10 years, $136 million. And that was, on a second extension for a guy who had already been well established as their franchise corner piece. And so given a 20-year-old guaranteed $182 million with a potential of $223 million. I mean, that's a very big deal. Like you said, it's good for both sides. Wander gets an immediate raise right now. I mean, you think the Rays could have easily let him make the major league minimum, for the next couple years, which is like 950,000 or 780,000. It's somewhere right around there. It's under $1 million. They could have let him make that for 3 years and then go into arbitration. And he probably would have got $16 million in his second year of arbitration, maybe even into third year of arbitration, just depending on the numbers and whatever. I mean, who knows what CBA even looks like, but he gets, an on average $16 million a year now. So, it's immediate money for him that for playing at the level he is. It gives him some long-term stability. It also gives the Rays some long-term, stability as well. Like you said, they've had to trade players a lot, as they get closer to free agency because they can't afford to re-sign them. This is a very affordable deal. And one thing that was kind of wild is we saw the $223 million or whatever is just about what the Rays payroll has been combined over the last 4 years. So it's definitely the Rays committing a lot of money compared to what they're used to.
Yeah, no doubt, and we'll see what ends up happening there. But like I said, if you're Wander Franco, I mean, hopefully he goes on to have a fantastic career. But you could always end up having that jerks and profar career where you just can't, you get injured a few times, can't ever stay healthy, and you turn into a guy who had so much potential and never lived up to it just because of health, and not necessarily because he's not good or works hard or whatever, just because of health. And this prevents that from limiting how much money you can make in your career. I bet Jerks and Profar wishes he had signed something like this when he was, right at his big league call up. And, um, I don't want to make that comparison because I think Wander Franco is going to end up being, a Hall of Famer one day, possibly. But, that's just kind of something to think about. If it's a young player, signing this deal puts you, regardless of buying out some free agent years where you could make a lot of money, this puts you in a situation of generational wealth, and that's something that you just can't turn down. But we'll see how it works out. Obviously, it's not something that really doesn't change all that much for the coming year or two, around the grand scheme of things. But in the future, I think that's a big deal. So we'll like to see that.
It absolutely is. Let's go ahead and move on to our next one, and that's with Kendall Graveman signing or close to signing a 3-year, $24 million deal with the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, so the Chicago White Sox had one of the best bullpens in baseball this year. There's been rumors out there that they might try to trade Kimbrel. So, kind of put Liam Hendricks back in that closer role. And if you do trade Kimbrel, you need a right-handed reliever because, you got the lefties and Garrett Crochet, who may end up starting next year, and also Aaron Bummer. So, um, and then you got the righty and Hendricks to close, but you probably want a second righty, and depending on what they decided with Kopech as a starter or reliever or whatever. So, this is a really nice signing for them. He pitched to a 177 ERA this year, really solid. Was at Seattle for most of the year, then got traded to Houston at the deadline, and his peripherals didn't quite back up the crazy ERA, but his stuff definitely took a step forward. And I think he'll continue to take a step forward, next year. Maybe not to a 177 ERA, but I think looking at something in the low threes to sub 3 range is pretty reasonable for Kendall Graveman, and that definitely warrants a pretty nice contract like this. So I definitely like the pickup of Kendall Graveman for them, and just adds to what's already a really solid bullpen.
Yeah, this was the first year Graveman really committed to being, a full-time bullpen arm. He was a starter for Oakland mostly. Even came to Seattle and was trying to be a starter again. Then got demoted back to the bullpen last year. So finally seeing him commit to that bullpen role, his fastball velocity jumped up almost like 2 miles an hour. Going into strictly the bullpen where he doesn't have to worry about saving himself. His strikeout rate jumped up, almost to 10% or 10 strikeouts per 9. His walks are still there, but I mean, with that velocity uptick and just being able to throw, not worrying about maybe throwing your changeup as much. I think he's more being a sinker slider type guy that allowed him to really unlock something. So it's going to be interesting to see how he can really continue that. There was a lot of talk at the deadline about the Mariners, shouldn't have traded him because, the clubhouse and making that run for the postseason. But, now they got Abraham Toro for a full season or for, 5 or 6 more years while Graveman is going on in free agency and signing with the White Sox. So, good deal for Graveman. And looking back, at the deadline now, Seattle made the right call in doing that move. But it will be interesting. There is the talk about trading Craig Kimbrel. I doubt you're going to bring that guy, or, your setup guy in for $18 million. If you could trade him, I was looking today, and if you have a Graveman, Hendricks, like a Bummer, if Kopech and Crochet stay in the bullpen, and also they still have Ryan Tepera, that is a really good bullpen. And then we've already talked about, Lucas Giolito, Lance Lynn, Dylan Cease. I mean, and if they can re-sign or sign another starter, how Carlos Rodon or around that caliber, and then having those guys in the bullpen this year for another full season, it could be really nasty. And Kimbrel kind of struggled once he got over there, but if you can get kind of good production out of what Graveman gave this season, in that White Sox bullpen, that'll be pretty scary to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt, and we'll see what ends up happening. Um, you know, as that's as Kendall Graveman's a guy who I don't think he's quite Kimbrel, but I mean maybe he's better than Kimbrel was with the White Sox. So
Yeah.
um, definitely interesting, and obviously the White Sox have more moves yet to be made. I don't think they really want Dallas Keuchel being in a potential playoff rotation. Um, so we'll see what ends up happening there, but definitely interesting stuff, and I like the signing for the White Sox.
Yeah, it's not too bad at all. So let's hit on one more signing we have. It's a very minor signing, but Jose Quintana signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, Jose Quintana is a guy who's been really embattled ever since he put up 4 straight 200 innings seasons where he pitched to 4 wins above replacement in all 4 of those seasons with White Sox. He was traded over to the Cubs in the 2017 deadline, and just hadn't been the same guy ever since. His walks went up, his home run per fly ball rate went up a lot. That really had more to do with it with the change than the walks did. He actually ended up starting to strike out more guys, but he just hasn't really been the same guy. Battled injuries a lot the last couple years, and this year was a disaster for him. And when he was with the Angels, and then he got traded to the Giants midseason, and just wasn't very good. His walks were high. He pitched to a 6.43 ERA this year, but there are still some things to like about Jose Quintana. If he can get healthy and stay healthy this season, um, some of the projection systems still like him to a round of 4 ERA, and that's a guy that you could potentially trade at the deadline. So while this is a very under the radar move, it could be an interesting move for the Pirates to maybe cop a prospect off of somebody around the deadline if Quintana can regain a little bit of his form from his White Sox days, especially, but probably more. If he can pitch to something like he did with a couple of the seasons with the Cubs, he could probably get them something of some kind of value at the deadline. So, and then of course it's super low risk if not. I mean, it's only $2 million for 1 year. So this is really the kind of move that team like the White Sox, I mean, a team like the Pirates needs to make, and obviously they made that move. So that I really like that for the Pirates.
Yeah, it's a really solid deal for the Pirates. If Quintana's the same guy, like you said, it's only a $2 million deal, and if he becomes a guy like he was in either one of the Chicago places, I mean, if you can get him back to even what the Cubs did, that'll be solid. If you can get him to what the White Sox did, you can get probably a legitimate, maybe bullpen arm for him at the deadline or something. It's the type of move a Pirates team or a Diamondbacks team or one of these lower teams that are the Orioles that are just not going to be competing this year, and they're just trying to kind of in that rebuild phase that they should take a risk and try and trade somebody off for cheap at the deadline. So it's pretty interesting to see what Quintana can do going back to the NL Central again. So. But we'll basically jump over to the kind of the rumors we have going swirling around. And, one other rumor we got this week was that the Marlins are closing in on a 5-year extension with starting pitcher Sandy Alcantara for north of $55 million in total.
Yeah, so Sandy Alcantara we talked about him a lot this year, and he had a fantastic season. Pitched 200 innings, 205 innings. Pitched to a 3.19 ERA, 3.42 FIP, 3.45 xFIP. So he pitched a fantastic, had a fantastic line there. His strikeout rate was up, walk rate was down. A guy who, his kind of downfall when he was in the minor leagues and coming up was his walks. And he had a really good walk rate this year. So that's a really encouraging sign. Has great stuff. Probably his best days are yet to come, too. And, the Marlins are a team that's kind of a type of guy that they want to build their rotation around. And obviously, they've got a lot of other pieces there, like Trevor Rogers. Pablo Lopez. They got pieces coming up in Max Mayer and Edward Cabrera, who we saw a little bit this year, but we'll probably see more of him next year. So there's a lot of pieces here, and Alcantara is a guy that they can really build around. And if you can buy him out of a year or two of free agency, that could really help them in the future for another team that probably is going to struggle to re-sign big money deals with free agents. So um, you know, I like what a potential 5-year $55 million type deal would be for him, and if the Marlins could pull that off, it'd be really nice for them and for him as well. So
Yeah, even if it's a 5 year like $70 million deal, I mean that's still not you know that's still not way too much for Alcantara. Like that is a really solid deal for both sides. If he's giving you the type of production he gave you this year, one of the big keys behind it the past couple seasons is that his fastball velocity has jumped over the last 3 years. Back in 2019, it was looking at about 95. 2020 went up to 97, and then in 2021 it jumped up to 98. So it's going to be interesting to see if that keeps upticking as he's going to enter his age 26 season this year. But like you said, buying out 2 years, possible 2 years of free agency, I think is what it is. On a relatively decent contract, it'll be worth probably 12 to 13 million dollars in total by the end of it. That's relatively good for a guy who is a potential ace. I mean, that's a really under the radar signing for the Marlins if they can pull this off. I just look for him to keep getting better because this season was absolutely insane that he had, and the best is yet to come from Sandy, I think.
yeah, absolutely. I really like this. So
Well, one other little rumor that we had is that Steven Matz was of the Blue Jays this past year. Is supposed to sign before Thanksgiving, and most of it he's supposed to make his decision tomorrow or on Wednesday, as we are recording this on Tuesday. There's a bunch of rumors. I think we've heard of over 10 teams in on him. At least 8 teams have made some sort of a contract offer to him. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he picks. They're from all over. I mean, we've heard the Angels, the Giants, the Cubs, the Red Sox, the Mets are trying to get him back, the Blue Jays, the Dodgers. A good portion of the league is in on Steven Matz, and he's supposed to make his decision before we record our next episode.
yeah, Steven Matz is really interesting. He's really only pitched a good season twice. In 2016, he pitched fantastic in 22 innings in his rookie year. In 22 games in his rookie year. Sorry, 132 innings with a 3.40 ERA. And a really solid season. Then he's really struggled since then until 2021, where he pitched 150 innings to a 3.82 ERA. He's a guy that in the past has struggled with home runs, high home run per fly ball rate, but he seemed to unlock a little bit this year. He cut his walk rate down a little bit. Um, and put up his lowest home run per nine rate since 2016 with the Mets, and he put up a much better ground ball rate than he did in 2020 when he was really bad. So this is a guy who you could probably rely on to give you 150-ish innings of a sub 5 ERA, probably a sub 4.5 ERA, but definitely a guy who has a little bit more potential in there if you can continue to unlock what the Blue Jays seem to this year. um and he's also a guy that has a little bit of a injury concern as well, as he's never eclipsed 160 innings before. Except in 2019, 160.1 is his career high. So he's definitely somebody who probably a risky signing if it's a long-term deal. I kind of expect him to get a shorter deal, where a team maybe feels like they could figure some more stuff out with him and boost him to be the pitcher that he really could be if he figures it out. So we'll see what happens. I don't really have a prediction on where he might end up. Um, I think he's a type of guy who the Giants would do really well with, as we talked about earlier. I actually really like that. Um, but I'm not really sure who else I might see him going to. But I could definitely see him re-signing in Toronto. Maybe go to I don't know. There's a lot of different places that you could see him. So obviously there's 10 teams involved. But
Yeah, I think I had picked him going to the Angels in our other thing. It makes a little bit of sense. With that many teams in, I assume he's at least going to get a 2-year deal, maybe even a 3-year deal, unless he absolutely is dead set on having a 1-year deal and seeing what the CBA looks like and coming out next year. But a guy like Steven Matz, last year in 20 or this year in 2021, it was his first time outside of the Mets organization. First time, with new pitching coaches that are, a whole new scenery around him that he can kind of just reinvent himself. And it seems like, Toronto was able to find something. They did it with Robbie Ray. It seems like they did it with Mats as well. A 3.82 ERA and a 3.79 FIP. I mean, that's pretty solid. And if you can get that from him every year, I mean, that's a number 4 to number 5 starter, legitimately. So it will be interesting to see where he goes and if he's able to keep this. None of his peripherals, like you said, look too much different outside of his walks per nine went down a little bit. And the home runs per nine were down a lot, or the home run per fly ball rate is down a lot. But, if he can just channel part of this and continue that on, I mean, a 4 ERA guy, it's really solid still. And I don't think he's going to be getting anywhere near a 14-15 million dollars a year. I mean, he's probably going to be close to that 10 to 12 range. And for a number 5 starter, I mean, that's not terrible at all. So
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, our next little rumor here. Actually, this really isn't a rumor. It's more of a fact that actually happened, but not a signing. Uh, the the Japanese league has posted, or I don't know what team it was, but they posted Seiya Suzuki, who is a right-handed outfield bat who has drawn a lot of really, really high praise from scouts who believe that he could be a potential major league impact player right away. He's 27 years old. Like I say, has a pretty good outfield bat, can steal bases, has some speed, hits for power, and a lot of people really, really, really like his potential in the big leagues. And he's gotten a lot of people saying he's probably the best impact bat to come over since, other than Otani, obviously, since like a Hideki Matsui. So this could be really interesting to see who might pick him up.
yeah, it is going to be really interesting. He has played some infield, but very little of it. He profiles more as a right fielder. I think they were saying that he has a really strong arm. I think Mike Scioscia, who was one of the scouts or one of the people who were coaching against him or something, said that he has a really strong arm from right field. Probably if he came in, might be the best arm from right field out of anyone that he's seen. There's a bunch of different projections out there about the type of guy he can be, and you always have to be kind of mindful about how the transition for the offense will go from players coming over from Japan to the major leagues, because the ball's a little bit smaller, and the pitching's a lot. There's more velocity over here, there's less movement over here. The batting, your batting style and stance and your load up is a lot different timing wise compared to what it is over there. So it is going to be interesting to see how he will able to transition over. There's some people have said that they've compared him to, maybe a AJ Pollock back in his Arizona days, where he's a really good defender. He can, put up, like you said, close to 25 home runs. So it is going to be interesting to see, where he goes, especially if we're going to get a full DH this year. Maybe that'll allow some of the National League teams to even look into him a little bit more about potentially, moving one of their outfielders in. It's going to be interesting because of the way the CBA or the way the posting system works. You have 30 days from the day you're posted to sign a contract. So if from when he was posted, his day would be December 22nd to sign. But because we have the CBA, shutdown looming on December 1st, if that lockout does happen, he will be given the balance of the days after the CBA is resolved. So if he got, 9 days before, he'd get 21 days after the CBA is resolved, whenever that is, to sign, or he would have to go back overseas.
Yeah, as we talked about, there's going to be the market for him is going to be really weird because of the CBA potential. With he's going to have probably like a week of being posted, and then they're going to go into the lockout most likely, unless something drastic changes in the next week or two. And then we don't know when he might be able to sign, so I'm sure it's probably going to be stressful on him. I think some question marks with him, as you said, the velocity thing. Is he going to be able to hit fastballs at the big league level? Does he have the bat speed for that? How does he project to that? How long will it take him to adjust to that? And I think there's potential, maybe based on his scouting report, that you might get him over here and see that he could play center and that might be a big deal for his market as well. Could he potentially play center, which would open up some other teams? I know that kind of the typical players for these for the Japanese free agents are probably going to be in on him, like the Mariners. Um, you got the Rangers are a player a lot of times for these international free agents, and there's been a few teams rumored like the Braves that haven't signed one of these guys in a long time. So it's gonna be very interesting to see. I think a couple teams like maybe the Braves, the Mets, the Phillies, might change their opinions on this. And probably not the Mets because of just not even thinking about Conforto being gone. But with the Braves and Phillies need somebody who can play center, so that might be something that changes their opinions a little bit on him. But we'll see what happens here. He had a fantastic career, and one note that you mentioned, Mike Scioscia had talked about him and had coached against him. That was the Olympics this year. He was the
That's right.
Seiya Suzuki was the gold medal Japan team, and Mike Scioscia was the manager of the silver medal U.S. team. So definitely interesting there that having him in that Olympic competition in Tokyo. So um, we'll see what happens. Obviously, a guy who has a lot of potential. And I think a lot of people have said that they think he's probably going to be better than Hyun-Sung Kim, who came over last year and signed with the Padres. So, we this is probably a potential better bat than that. So it'll be interesting to see what might happen with him. But buyers beware, because it is the Japanese league, and it's been a little inconsistent with Japanese hitters coming over from there in the past. I mean, you've had some hits like Otani, Hideki Matsui, and you've had some misses like potentially looks like Kim is, or um,
Shogo Akiyama even.
yeah, Shogo Akiyama, a little bit of a miss. And several of them back in the mid 2000s that there are a lot of guys you just don't remember their names. So um, but we'll see what happens. I think it'll be very interesting, and I think this guy potentially could be an impact player who, if you sign him to that contract, you might be able to get him on a pretty good contract because of the risk. But it's also possible that he ends up not really being an impact guy. So definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think what's going to be really interesting about Suzuki is that how much money is he going to sign for? Because we typically see the guys come over from the Japan League or whatever, they don't sign massive contracts. I think Kim's last year was like what, a 5 for like 30 or something. It was like relatively cheap, and if he's considered one of the top bats on the market, if you're looking at a guy like maybe Nick Castellanos or Suzuki, if you can get Castellanos is looking for 85 to $100 million deal, and you can get Suzuki on a $50 million deal. I mean, you're gonna go for that. So, depending on what kind of contract he is and what that CBA looks like, if there is a DH, universal DH, that will really unlock part of the market. I mean, you mentioned even the Braves, like the Mets, the Phillies, probably. There's even been rumors that a team like the Reds would even try and make a move for Suzuki, even though they're trying to cut payroll, that they would potentially do it. There's even, I don't know where this one would even come from, but there's been talks that the Dodgers are still interested in him. Like, a bunch of teams are still interested in him because of the potential and what that contract would look like, based on what international, people coming from Japan usually get on their free agent contracts. So it's really going to be interesting to see, if he's able to work out a deal soon, or if he has to wait until after that CBA happens. But he's been a guy that has been hyped up for a couple years for sure. But we'll go ahead and move on to our last little story we want to talk about, and that's that Ken Rosenthal reported today that Corey Seager has pretty much the biggest desire out of all the big name free agents to sign before the CBA expires on December 1st.
Yeah, definitely interesting. It sounds like the Dodgers are still involved with wanting to bring him back, and then also the Rangers are one of the top teams involved. I think that obviously for the Rangers' purposes, you're looking for that impact guy that can come in immediately and be the star that you haven't had, and kind of build around and guy to build around. And then for the Dodgers, obviously you're trying to add back a player who's been a big part of their success the last few years. So we'll see what happens. I think obviously that would be in the next 8 days because the lockout potentially would be starting on December 1st. So we'll see. Maybe he signs, maybe he doesn't. I think there's definitely other teams that could end up getting involved last minute. I think the Phillies are a team that is probably going to try to go after him. I don't know how much he wants to go there, but they want to go after him. I think the Yankees might get involved at the last minute again. I think that, and there's some other teams that maybe mystery teams like maybe like the Cubs or somebody that could potentially get involved. So, um, you know, it'll be interesting to see what might happen there. I probably would expect him to either sign with. I kind of expect him to sign with the Dodgers or maybe one of those mystery teams. I don't especially expect him to sign with the, um, with the Rangers, because for Corey Seager, I mean, he's making this choice, and it might be tough for the Rangers to lure in one of the top free agents because their lack of competition for at least another year or two, even with one of them. So. Um, I think probably you probably would have to consider the Dodgers the favorite right now, but that there's 3 or 4 other teams that are still in there, and I would probably bet on the field, but out of every team, probably the Dodgers have the highest chance that I would say, but maybe the field would be the team. I would probably pick the field over the Dodgers. So, but the Dodgers being the highest chance of any individual team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There's still a lot of talks. About LA wanting him back. He even said, he still wants to come back, but most players still say that. So, if he is going to make a decision in the next week, it will be interesting to see. It seems like the market has been pretty hot for him, since free agency. And, he's going to be probably the biggest free agent off the board at the time. And he seems like he's going to be the fastest one to do it. So, you said the mystery teams like the Cubs, there has been some rumors that, he could potentially, or the Cubs could potentially be interested, but you would feel like that those are going to have to start coming out soon. Those teams are going to have to start servicing soon if he really does want to decide before this December 1st deadline. And the 2 big names you're hearing are the Rangers and the Dodgers right now. So it would be interesting to see over the next week who of those other teams, kind of surface for him. Where where those are and what kind of contract that he potentially is looking for. We haven't really seen or heard what they're even looking for. So it is going to be interesting over this next week or so, and hopefully hopefully he has a decision by the time we record next week.
Yeah, for sure, it's entirely possible. So.
Oh, and one little thing that is, it's not big to you guys as much, but the non-tender deadline has been moved from December 1st now to the 30th. So that will happen as we record next week will be the non-tender deadline. So we'll have a lot of moves of people who were not offered salary arbitration. And usually there's some shocking names. Like last year there was Kyle Schwarber. Was one of the shocking names that didn't get arbitration. So that will make for a pretty interesting episode next week.
Yeah, for sure. And one other little note, they announced, obviously the awards were announced last week, and they also announced the comeback player of the years, like I think yesterday. And as expected, Buster Posey won for the National League, and then the American League was Trey Mancini, also as expected, coming off of missing a season due to cancer, and then of course Buster Posey coming off a couple injury-plagued seasons, and then missing the entirety of 2020, and then put up one of the better seasons of his career. So just a quick note there, not one of the biggest awards out there, but definitely a big award. So
yeah, I did hear something. Glad you mentioned that because I wanted to mention this. I believe, don't fact check me on this, but I believe Buster Posey is the first person to win the Comeback Player of the Year award twice because he won it after he came back from breaking his leg, and then he won it this year.
oh
And
really?
and,
I
and
didn't even realize that.
I don't know of anybody else that has ever won the Comeback Player of the Year award twice. So that is pretty interesting. But don't fact check me because I could be absolutely wrong on that.
It'll be interesting when he wins the Comeback Player of the Year again in 2023 when he comes back from retiring.
Yeah. I think Heyman said something about that too. It was pretty funny, but
yeah.
But congrats on both those players, especially a Trey Mancini after battling stage 3 colon cancer, to come back and play at that level he did, and win that award. It was a real tearjerker. When he was able to come back in the ovation he got, and then to see the way he was still playing.
Yeah, that's really remarkable for sure.
Absolutely. So that's going to wrap up this episode, though, of the Bat Flip podcast. And thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.